dating is for the purpose of you quickly, I mean as short as possible, and effectively, which means you want to do it right, determine if they would make a suitable spouse. And it is not much of anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hello and welcome back to Unreligiously. My name is Lauren, and today we are going to be debunking modern Christian dating advice. If you've ever found yourself single in an evangelical church, or maybe just navigating the dating world after leaving the church, then you know exactly what we're talking about. For many of us, the landscape of romantic relationships was less about authentic connection with another person and more about navigating a labyrinth of unspoken rules and guidelines, and a pervasive, often fear-based form of Christian dating advice.
If you're not a Christian wife, or you're not even trying to be one, just keep scrolling. But if you are one, or you want to be, listen up. Because marriage is not for the rebellious, not for the argumentative, and not for the woman who has to be in control. God didn't design marriage to be a fight. He designed it to be a covenant, a covering, a place of peace. You can be beautiful, you can be bold, you can be successful, but if your presence feels like pressure instead of peace, he won't run home to you. He'll run from you. For one, he's not looking for a debate partner. He's had a long day at work, pressure, spiritual battles, and the minute that he walks into the door, boom. Why didn't you text me back? Why didn't you do what I said? Now he's defending himself at home. Sis, he didn't marry you to be cross-examined. Every time you question him, correct him, challenge him on every move, he doesn't hear, I love you. He hears, you don't respect me. Nagging isn't communication. It's noise. Proverbs 27:15 says, a nagging wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. Think you're helping? He feels like he's drowning. And remember your tone more than your words.
Today we are doing a deep dive, a comprehensive deep dive, and it is debunking modern Christian dating advice from an evangelical perspective. For the next little bit here, we're going to sit back and relax and pull back the curtain on this often insidious system of advice. We're going to dissect its origins and expose its hidden harms. And ultimately, we're going to end it with offering a path towards a healthier, more authentic, and, truly equitable relationships, free from the baggage that we were told was biblical. For me, growing up, dating wasn't just dating. It felt like a spiritual minefield and a high-stakes game of discerning the one and avoiding temptation and ensuring that every single step of the way aligned with what was presented as God's perfect plan for marriage and for my life. The advice was everywhere. It was in books, it was in sermons, youth group talks that we had at Bible camp, purity pledges. It promised clarity and protection and ultimately a blissful, God-ordained marriage. The reality, though, for so many of us was often confusion or shame or isolation and just profoundly unhealthy relationship dynamics at the end of the day. My thesis for this extensive conversation is this. Modern Christian, in quotes, dating advice, because it's not all Christians, but modern Christian dating advice, particularly within evangelicalism, is often a culturally constructed system designed to control people and their sexuality, to reinforce traditional gender roles, and to maintain institutional power rather than to foster genuinely healthy, equitable, and authentic relationships.
Maturing is realizing the most important quality to look for in a person is their love for God. Not just vibes, not just playlists and green flags, but someone who actually prays. Someone who prays for you, with you, before they even knew you. Listen, I grew up in the church and I've tried it everywhere else. But at some point you come to the realization that you're only going to find gold in a gold mine.
For Exvangelicals, deconstructing this advice is super important to heal from the relational trauma and reclaiming personal agency and building connections based on mutual respect, informed consent, and genuine compatibility without any sort of fear or, external performance. For evangelicals, deconstructing this advice is crucial for healing from relational trauma, reclaiming personal agency, and building connections based on mutual respect, on informed consent, and even just genuine compatibility, free from fear and pressure for external performance.
Being married is not a sign of spiritual maturity. Being married is not a sign of spiritual maturity, and being single is not a sign of spiritual immaturity. And I hate to turn into one of those Christians that just talks about dating, because I really don't want to, but this is actually a problem that I'm seeing in the church and the way that we are speaking to singles. There is this trend going around, and I talked about it in my last video, where people are making it seem as though, you know, in order for you to get married or to find the one or to meet the one God has for you, you've got to be whole. Like, you've got to be super spiritually mature. Your relationship with God has to be on 100. Your health has to be on 100. You've got to have, you know, your career in order, your purpose. You need to be walking on your journey. And that is not true. That is not true, because, and as I said in my last video, you can just look around. Think of all the married people you know right now, even the ones in the church and outside of the church. Most of those people, if not all of those people, met their spouses while there were struggles and difficulties in their lives. Like,
this is going to be a thorough and deeply personal conversation for a lot of us. And so I want to start with defining what this Christian dating advice usually entails. And then we'll talk about the true historical and theological origins, because it's really not as ancient as you would think. After that, we're going to dive into the profound harms, because it does harm a lot of people. It inflicts harm on a lot of individuals and relationships. Finally, and most importantly, we'll talk about what genuinely healthy dating looks like once you step away from your group, and how to build connections that are truly liberating and fulfilling for you. So let's dive into it, and let's begin the conversation. Let's begin by clearly defining what we mean by modern Christian dating advice, because this isn't about general wisdom or healthy communication. It's a very specific, often codified set of principles and practices that permeate evangelical youth culture, purity culture, and marriage preparation.
I've seen so many people turn away from really good men who are just learning the process of sanctification, and they're like, no, can't do it. He's doing this. He's being sanctified just like you. Mm-hmm. And this relationship is actually supposed to sharpen him. So don't expect him to be perfect. Rather, expect him to be willing. And if he's not willing, then that's going to tell you his fruit. And that's going to tell you how he feels about you and how he wants to move forward in Christ. So if he's not willing, okay, different story. But don't expect him to be perfect, because he's not perfect whatsoever. And neither are you.
It's not just advice. It's presented as the God-ordained way to approach romantic relationships. While there is some variation depending on who you are and what church you're a part of, this advice does usually cluster around a few key tenets. The first is dating versus courtship and having a really purposeful relationship with somebody. Oftentimes in the church, people can claim that dating is really, really worldly, and it's just going to lead to heartbreak, sexual immorality, and a lack of clear purpose for everyone involved, that you're essentially choosing to date someone else's future spouse. Courtship, or biblical dating, was promoted as the superior and God-honoring alternative. Courtship really emphasizes a clear, intentional path towards marriage from the very first interaction. There isn't a casual hanging out, no dating around. You were only to pursue a relationship with the express and stated purpose of marriage.
Our courting experience was so fast, though.
Quick, fast, in a hurry.
It was like you was moving fast.
We had to hurry up and get you off the market.
So is that what courtship, like, what is courtship like from a man's perspective? Because it's to really get to know you.
Often there's parental involvement, like super heavy parental involvement, and the relationships were conducted in the light, meaning that they had to be supervised all the time. If you're going to the movies, you have a little brother coming with you. If you go to you wanted them to come over to your house, there's no closed doors. You can't go into your bedroom.
I think that with courtship, it almost put up a false sense of safety around that relationship, where it left out any room for error. And you weren't allowed to see, okay, who is this person actually? What self-control do they have? What boundaries are they actually going to push? And I think that was something, looking back now, that I see was an issue with it. And so, yeah, we can get into like the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
The outcome that is promised from this is that you're going to be able to remain pure, you're going to have protection from heartbreak, a clear path to finding the one, and you'll have a marriage that's blessed by God. And it's kind of founded on purity culture. They say that sexual purity before marriage is super important and is often equated with a woman's value or worth. It's not just about avoiding sex, it's about avoiding anything that could lead to it. So if you're holding hands, you're kissing, or even extended periods of time alone could be deemed as stumbling blocks or things that are leading you away from God. You know, a lot of times we see this manifesting in people not kissing until their wedding days, thinking things like, don't let your heart go places that your body shouldn't, guard your heart, don't ignite the passion too soon. And this concept of emotional purity is just huge in evangelical cultures.
Listen up. So many Christians have the mindset that the only reason to date is to get married. And I happen to think that that mindset is hurting our dating lives. We put so much pressure on dating when we try to find out in the first few dates if this is the person that we are going to get married to. Reality is, you're not really going to know if you want to marry them unless you actually get to know them. The wiser thing is to date to see if you want to be in a relationship with that person. Then the relationship is to see if you want to get engaged. So while you're dating, you start getting to know them. As you get to know them, then you can build trust and you can see if this is somebody that you can actually depend on. But when the
concept of emotional purity is there too. Falling in love with someone else is not good. You should wait until someone that you're going to marry. You're promised with purity culture a pure wedding night, a marriage free from the baggage of sexual sin, a deeper spiritual connection with your spouse, a great sex life. This is all deeply intertwined with the promises of sexual fulfillment within marriage, which is kind of juxtaposed against the misery of the world's sexual practices. Then they also kind of believe in the one, that God has a specific person picked out for you who's kind of your soulmate, and your job is to pray and discern and wait for God to reveal this person to you, often through a feeling of peace or giving you that kind of like confirmation sense.
Remember, when it's from God, it's going to be a slow burn. If you're wondering why it's taking so much time, it's because it's from God. If you're wondering why your business isn't taking off, if you're wondering why the love of your life isn't right in front of you and you're like, hey, well, what's going on? If you're wondering why the job's not there yet, if you're wondering why you're not having a child yet, it's because God's timing's perfect.
The rules here for women are that you can't chase, you can't seek things out, you just need to wait on God. You can't settle, and if a relationship doesn't feel perfectly God ordained or causes any friction, then it's not the one.
Also, from a woman's perspective, I have completely let go of the feeling of being like, am I doing enough? Am I texting him enough? Am I saying enough? Am I initiating enough? It's like, sister, no. You are the woman, he is the man, he is going to pursue you. I don't want to have to fight for a man to pursue me.
The outcome here is that you find your divine perfect match and that you then have a marriage that's free from, any major conflict because God picked them for you, and a supernatural understanding that transcends human compatibility, that if God is your focus, then you can get through anything. Traditional gender roles are also completely non-negotiable. Dating or courtship advice in these communities explicitly reinforce complementarian gender roles, which makes men the initiators, leaders, and providers, and women as responders, helpers, and nurturers.
Brutally honest boy advice from your big sis in Christ. A man that is sent from God, you won't have to chase. The man that God has for you is going to pursue you. You are not going to have to pursue him.
Men are told to pursue, lead, and protect and provide, and women are told to wait to be pursued, to respect his leadership, and to be a helper, and to cultivate their inner beauty, which often is just kind of code word for being submissive. Women initiating contact or expressing clear interest is often in the church seen as unbiblical or emasculating. They also tell you to seek counsel on relationships and that you kind of shouldn't just trust your own judgment or desires, that you need spiritual accountability and guidance from your older and wiser, mind you, just more traditionally minded Christians, often youth pastors, youth leaders, or even married couples. Every stage of the relationship will need to be prayed over, have God's involvement, and be vetted by godly people. Group dates might be encouraged. Individual alone time with that person is likely discouraged, and the church leadership might ask for transparency about what you're doing with them sexually. The framework is presented as something that's timeless, biblically, mandated truth, but it is not. It's not the only way to secure a successful marriage, and as we'll see, the origins are way more recent. They are far from ancient. Now that we've clearly defined the tenets of modern Christian dating advice, let's get to a really important point. The origins are not ancient and certainly not exclusively biblical in the way that it was presented. This advice is a largely modern construct.
The English Standard Version, or ESV, translation of the Bible was created specifically to codify complementarian views of men and women into the Evangelical Bible. Wayne Grudem, the co-founder of the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, along with Crossway Publishing, bought the RSV version in the late 90s and worked to try to make it more conservative. Beth Allison Barr, professor and author, has written a lot about this. She's got some great articles, and her book has a lot about this too, but I want to show you just a few really interesting things that they changed from the RSV to make it more appropriate for them. Changing Genesis 3:16 from your desire shall be for your husband to your desire shall be contrary to your husband in order to blame the curse for women's desire for authority. Separating Ephesians 5:21 from the rest of the paragraph that it's in order to separate the idea of being subject to one another from the idea of husbands and wives. Or like changing women should rule their households to women should manage their households.
A relatively recent response to cultural shifts strategically marketed as divine revelation. For example, there's Christian advice presents courtship as a timeless biblical model, and they can contrast it against worldly dating. But the Bible offers no sort of prescriptive model for dating or courtship as we would understand them today. Ancient cultures, including those that were, taking place in biblical times, practiced arranged marriage or family negotiations, not romantic relationships initiated by young people for the purpose of seeking a spouse. Marriage was often an economic or tribal alliance, not really, centered around individual romantic love or compatibility. The idea of romantic love as the foundation for a marriage is relatively modern, and the biblical dating model is just a modern evangelical invention that selectively pulls a few verses out of context, like about purity or submission, and builds an entire elaborate system around them, ignoring the broader historical and cultural context of biblical time.
I was about the same age. I was 13 years old. I went to something called True Love Waits. Yeah, confusing because it was followed by an all-night unsupervised lock-in. So that's tricky. Okay, and you at 12 years old, we all made that purity pledge, you know what I'm saying? And that's wild, contract to sign at that age, because that was before puberty. And some of y'all didn't know how hot you were gonna go on to be.
In the purity movement, that happened back in the 90s with books like Joshua Harris's I Kiss Dating Goodbye becoming foundational texts. This wasn't a centuries-old tradition. It was a direct response to rising concerns about premarital sex, AIDS, and perceived sexual permissiveness in sexual culture. Evangelical leaders really wanted to create a distinct subculture to protect youth from perceived moral decay.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die.
And to offer a clear, prescriptive path to successful relationships. If they leveraged fear, the fear of STDs, heartbreak, the fear of defilement, and, ultimately the fear of God's wrath, if you didn't adhere. While purity of heart is a biblical concept, the purity culture defines purity primarily as sexual virginity, particularly for women.
Problem of self-justification.
Just because I watch these movies doesn't mean I necessarily agree with the subject matter.
It's all fake anyways. You shouldn't make a big deal about it. Oh! Yeah, I know there's some bad scenes in it, but there's this one really cool scene where the bad guy dies and goes to hell. And that's biblical, isn't it?
It objectifies women and their virginity as a commodity, as in a gift for your future spouse. And often people that, don't make it till their, marriage day to have sex, they're told that they're sexually broken and they are shamed. This advice became a really powerful tool for control. By dictating the intimate details of young people's romantic lives, churches and families could exert a ton of influence over their choices, over young people's choices, and ensure conformity to social norms, preventing undesirable pairings, and maintaining the power structures within the community. It creates a self-reinforcing loop. If you wanted to stay in the community, you had to follow the advice. If you didn't, then you were worldly and you might risk exclusion.
It will always be better to be single than to be in a relationship with someone who's lukewarm. It is better to be alone than to be with someone who doesn't even know how to love you. And I'm telling you, if he does not know the Lord, he does not know how to love you. It is literally impossible.
The dating advice was explicitly designed to funnel young people into complementarian marriages. Men were trained to be leaders and women were trained to be responders, setting up the stage for specific power dynamics within marriage that reinforces male headship and female submission. In essence, modern Christian dating advice, particularly its more rigid forms, emerged as a really strategic and culturally reactive movement that heavily was influenced by sociological anxieties, entrepreneurial, ventures, and a desire to maintain subcultural boundaries and control in the face of perceived secular threats. It's a product of specific historical moments, not timeless biblical revelation. Understanding this historical context is so crucial for truly debunking its claims to absolute authority.
I'm really glad you asked this. Complementarianism is the theology that says that while women and men are equal in status before God, they have different and complementary roles. So they believe that women cannot teach or be an authority over a man, that women have to submit to men. Men are the head of the family and the church. They're usually going to emphasize a lot of gender essentialism, saying that men are created for leadership and courage, and that they're more rational, while women are created for nurturing and loving and are more emotional. There are lots of different interpretations of complementarianism.
Now we come back to the heart of the topic for those of us that have actually lived through this. The profound harms and the unintended or perhaps intended consequences of this Christian dating advice. This isn't just about bad suggestions, it's about relational trauma, identity confusion, and deep spiritual wounding. Sexual shame is maybe the most pervasive harm. Both men and women face this after going through purity culture.
Why were we so told so many times it's so bad to have sex outside of marriage? And it was only girls, and it's that stereotype of the boys are playing basketball and the girls are sewing and having a lesson about purity. That's so real, and we lived through that.
And I mean, they did teach boys not to have sex before marriage too, but
in Mormonism, for sure.
But I'm sure their conversations were way different than ours.
Way different. And there's different expectations. It's not as frowned upon.
Because purity culture teaches that sexual purity is your value, especially for women. Any sort of deviation, whether by choice, by accident, or whether you face, a sexual assault or abuse of some kind, it leads to immense and sometimes lifelong shame and guilt. People are told that they're essentially damaged goods, used, defiled, dirty, and it makes healthy sexual expression within marriage super difficult because people associate sex with fear and shame for so long. They can't just switch, flip a switch as soon as they get married.
Ladies, when you get to his wedding night, he's been planning this night his whole life. So what you need to do is stand where he tells you to stand, wear what he tells you to wear, and do what he tells you to do. You're going to make him the happiest man in the world.
It built a really big disconnect between the body and the spirit. For survivors of sexual abuse, purity culture was particularly cruel. It often blames the victim for the brokenness or for losing their purity rather than condemning the abuser. The trauma that just adds on and how they silence people's voices has always really disturbed me. These standards of purity extend beyond sexual acts to things like thoughts and your feelings or your sexual orientation. It'll foster self-hatred. You're just going to end up feeling like you're a terrible person or developing some kind of moral scrupulosity. It can give people a real fear of intimacy by emphasizing to guard your heart and, not make emotional purity violations. This advice often taught people to be emotionally guarded, to fear vulnerability, and to suppress genuine feelings unless marriage is guaranteed.
I only date to marry because I'm pursuing a healthy relationship. You're stupid. You're acting stupid. I was that girl, that was me, until I realized that was a super warped view of dating. If you go into a relationship with the idea of pursuing marriage at the forefront, you are pursuing permanence over love. The only way to be healthy in a relationship is to love each other to the best of your ability every single day. Being loved and loving well is the healthiest thing you can do in a relationship. But if you are so focused on marriage and permanence and not having your heart broken, you are not loving that person to the best of your ability. Instead, you're idolizing the security you have have in your relationship, and that is more selfish than loving.
This fundamentally undermines the very foundation of healthy intimacy or the normal progression of a relationship. Trust, vulnerability, and open communication. Because casual dating was condemned, many were never taught how to have, basic healthy dating skills, how to initiate conversations naturally, how to build genuine friendships, how to navigate rejection, how to communicate boundaries, how to discern compatibility beyond a godly checklist. It goes on and on. The only accepted approach is to really seek an often, overly serious, immediate marriage-focused courtship that lacks that normal human development and progression. Relationships become less then about genuine connection and more about performing a specific godly role in your life or checking off boxes just to find the one.
I just saw a video that was a parody of the way that we in Christian culture get given the talk when we're children. If you don't know, I was raised really conservative Christian, and a lot of the things about the way that I was raised would honestly send people into a coma. Specifically, the way that we're given the talk by tons of different people throughout our upbringing really reinforces a lot of negative beliefs about yourself and your value, especially as a woman. So when I first received the talk, I was maybe 10 or 11. I got the talk often, and it was always a different metaphor. And this is common. The video that I saw was talking about all the different metaphors that our culture would use to kind of show you why you're not valuable if you aren't a virgin. The first metaphor was a water balloon. So it was you are this water balloon. And then they would take a needle and poke the water balloon and say, look how that water is now spilling out. And the more times you poke it, the more water spills out. And then soon, if you poke it too many times, you've got nothing left, and then this empty sack is what your husband gets of you. And how unfair that is to not give your husband your full virginity. The next time, I believe it was the toothpaste one, which is really common, squeezing out all the toothpaste from a toothpaste tube and then saying, now try to put it back together. You can't put it back in once it's out. That's it. Not only is it super traumatizing to think about your virginity in that way, but also it leads to a lot of problems later in life. So because I had been told my whole life, and it had been reinforced by plenty of different people over and over again, metaphor on metaphor, that I was essentially not worth anything to my husband if I wasn't a virgin or if I didn't lose my virginity to him, I tried to marry my abuser. The way that I ended up losing my virginity was by force. It was not my choice. And I then really tried for over a year to turn that situation, that relationship, into a marriage, because I thought it would be okay that I lost my virginity to this person outside of marriage if I married him.
Then your worth also becomes tied to external metrics. Your marital status, your purity, your adherence to gender roles. This made it incredibly difficult to develop an internal sense of self-worth and personal agency. Your identity is defined by your relationship to God and to a potential spouse, rather than your intrinsic value as a human being. Authenticity is often sacrificed for conformity. And if your desires, whether they're sexual, relational, or vocational, don't fit the mold, they're deemed as worldly or sinful, and that they need to be, suppressed, and it leads to a truly profound disconnect from your true self. Being single is often seen as a temporary state or a waiting period or even maybe a spiritual failure rather than just a valid, fulfilling stage of life. It creates a lot of pressure to find a spouse, often leading to settling or rushing into unhealthy relationships. This whole thing is also filled with false promises. It obviously promises you a blessed marriage, no problems, true intimacy, a great sex life, but we see actually that they're facing people who go through purity culture and religious environments like this actually have a lot of trauma that they have to work through. They have sexual dysfunction and loneliness. The collective impact of this advice was devastating for countless individuals.
Prepare to be mad by more purity culture comments. First up, my first youth pastor told me that I should wear multiple bras so that my chest wouldn't move. I was told that if I went to church with wet hair, I was causing men in the church to imagine me in the shower, which would cause them to have sinful thoughts. This next one is so disgusting that if you have a weak stomach, maybe skip it. When I was 12, the youth pastors got up on stage and chewed up a brownie and passed it around in each other's mouths until it disintegrated, and then compared that to a woman having premarital sex. Are y'all okay? My grandparents gave me a book when I was little about saving my first kiss for the man that God intended me to be with, and all the temptation that I was going to face to give it up. I was 5 or 6 years old.
It created a generation of people who were relationally stunted, deeply shamed about their sexuality, and ill-equipped to build authentic, healthy relationships outside of a rigid, performance-based framework. Healing from this requires not just moving on, but actively dismantling the programming that you've been put through. So we've thoroughly debunked the foundations of modern Christian dating advice and acknowledged the profound harms that it causes. Now comes one of the most important parts: reclaiming healthy relationships. This is about moving on from a place of reaction and hurt to one of intentionality, healing, and building connections that are genuinely authentic, respectful, and fulfilling. This process involves a significant paradigm shift away from fear-based rules and towards values-based connection. The first step that is important is to dismantle the internalized shame of purity culture. Understand that your body is not a commodity. Your worth is not tied to your sexual history, and desire itself is a natural and healthy part of just being alive and being a human. This often requires deep, compassionate inner work for yourself, and maybe even requires the help of a therapist that specializes in either sexual or religious trauma. Then you have to move beyond the fear-based rule following approach to sex and relationships and go into a truly ethical framework built on enthusiastic and ongoing consent and partnership. This means that you need to be able to learn to communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully, and actively listen for and respect the boundaries of other people in all areas, whether it's sexually, physically, spiritually, or any other way. This is about mutual respect, not control. People also have to let go of the myth of finding the one that God has for them. Instead, they have to just focus on genuine compatibility, shared values, complementary personalities, effective communication styles, similar life goals, and mutual respect. Relationships are built, not divinely discovered in a perfect prepackaged form. Understand that you get to choose who you want to build a life with. This choice is based on a careful discernment, real world interactions with that person, and genuine connection, not on mystical signs or a feeling of peace that could easily just be confirmation bias or anxiety. It can be helpful to reframe dating as an exploration of learning about yourself and others, and it's about building meaningful connections, whether they do form a long-term partnership or if you just learn some things in the meantime. It's okay to casually date and learn what kind of things you want and don't want, what your non-negotiables are, and who you connect with. Instead of guarding your heart, you can learn to practice healthy vulnerability. True intimacy requires showing up authentically, sharing your actual feelings, and being willing to be seen, even if it's uncomfortable. This means learning to communicate your needs, your desires, and your boundaries clearly, directly, and kindly. And you also have to accept that healthy relationships are not conflict-free. They're adept at conflict resolution. The path is not about finding a new set of rules to replace the old one. It's about cultivating an internal compass based on your own values, your intuition, and your lived experience, enabling you to build relationships that are truly reciprocal, respectful, and rooted in genuine love and freedom, not fear. So as I bring this extensive deep dive to a close, let's just recap the journey that we've kind of taken here. We began by clearly defining the specific tenets of modern Christian dating advice, from courtship models to purity culture to the one myths and rigid gender roles. We then talked about its origins and revealed that it is a really, really new thing. This is relatively modern. It's a culturally reactive construct designed to control and maintain power rather than a timeless biblical mandate. My hope in creating this video is not to demonize anybody who genuinely believed or was taught these ideas, but to shine a clear, bright light on a system that has, for far too long, in my opinion, caused a ton of pain, restricted authentic human connection, and inhibited genuine flourishing for people. I would love it if you guys want to, engage with these ideas, share your own stories, your reflections, and your experiences in the comments below. I would love to know how this, resonates with you, and what aspects of Christian dating advice you found the most harmful, and what your journey of healing has been like. You can also share resources if anything has helped you. And, please just be gentle with yourself, be patient as you navigate a deconstructing terrain, or as you choose to make different choices. Healing is not linear and it takes time. And remember that if you're finding yourself in that kind of space right now, wrestling with these kind of profound questions, whether you're single, dating, or married, you're not broken. Your past does not define your future. You're not too much, and you are enough. You're learning, you're growing, you're discerning, and you are reclaiming your agency and your worth. You are finding your way to build relationships based on respect and understanding and love. And maybe you're exactly where you need to be to embark on the most fulfilling journey of your life, the journey to your most authentic, whole, free self, capable of genuine, healthy love and connection. I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this and make it this far. Please like this video. Please subscribe or double check to make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already. Hit share and copy link. You don't have to send it anywhere, I promise, but it helps way more than you think that it does. And yeah, if you guys want to comment but you don't know what to say, comment to Dove. I try to respond as much as I can, and I'll usually respond to the doves with white hearts. So if you guys comment, there's a good chance I'll respond back to you. Please, there is a form in the description of my channel. So if you would like to be highlighted, if you think that you have a story that's worth sharing, I would love to hear about it. And I will get back to you if you're a good fit. So you can go ahead and fill that out. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.
Bro, honestly, if I had to give you fellas like one super solid piece of Christian dating advice,
preach on it,
solid piece, man. For me personally, when I'm looking for my future wife, I don't care how physically hot she is, bro.
He's such a good Christian.
Like for me as a man of God, the only thing I'm concerned with is how spiritually hot she is.
Yes, bro. He's so not horny.
Like you guys are in here talking like, oh man, I hope I'm attracted to my future wife. Do you not hear how distorted your worldview is, how secular it is? You guys are being so lustful. The only thing you should actually care about is, are you spiritually attracted to her?
Yes,
that's
bro.
it.
I want my wife to be
That's
godly.
it.
This
Somebody
guy
had to
needs a
make that
podcast.
for real.
Amen.
Like Steven comes up to me the other day, shows me a picture of a girl at church. Like, bro, isn't she gorgeous? Pervert? Pervert? How about you get your mind out of the gutter and follow God? How about you start asking, is she spiritually gorgeous? By the way, I creeped her on Insta, Steven. She posted a bikini pic like 3 years ago. Doesn't sound very spiritually gorgeous to me.
What the frick, Steven?
Fellas, date a girl that you're not physically attracted to. It's
This
the
guy is
only
such a
way to
better
follow
Christian
God.
than the rest
God